And welcome everyone to another episode of Beyond the Forecast. I am Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens, and today we are going to take you into more fun with science and weather. And in fact, today I'm going to break down dew and frost for you, how we see it, why we see it, and how it forms out there dependent on the season you are in. So we take you into dew and frost. And then meteorologist John Gross takes us into potholes. It is major pothole season right now across northern Michigan, and believe it or not, it has to do with weather and how those potholes form. There you go. So meteorologist John Gross will break that down for you as we head through the middle of the show. And then meteorologist Haley Fischetti and I had a new podcast for you, and we were talking about this past weekend's ice storm and basically just how big the storm was, but also what else happened with the storm, because we had ice, we had tornadoes, we had a lot of rain, and it all impacted northern Michigan just a little bit differently. So we'll have a segment of that coming up for you. But first, before we get into the show, let's talk about this day in weather history. So April 3rd, 1974, a super outbreak of tornadoes happened across Alabama all the way up to Michigan. 148 tornadoes formed over April 3rd and April 4th, majority of them on April 3rd through the afternoon, and 315 people lost their lives, with 5,300 others being injured. The biggest of the tornadoes happened to be in Xenia, Ohio, which was a massive F5 tornado that ripped right through their downtown, killing 34 people. That super outbreak was a massive outbreak of tornadoes, all based on a low pressure system very similar to what we've seen over the last few days, with a massive warm front that worked its way through. But those were some very, very large and damaging tornadoes, April 3rd through in 1974. All right, getting into trivia. Yesterday we asked you what you call a tornado that forms over water. Yeah, it's a water spout. But I'm not going to lie, it would be much cooler if it was called a water turbo. Can you imagine? A water turbo. But today, trivia, we are asking you, how many sides does a snowflake have? This one might be a little bit challenging for you. How many sides does a snowflake have? Is it 4, 6, 8, or 10? Hit the QR code. Weigh in yourself. See if you know this one. Prove to me that you know this one, and we'll have the answer for you tomorrow. But again, hit that QR code, weigh in, or yell at your screen. You can do either or. But is it 4, 6, 8, or 10? Now, viewer photo of the day. And as we're getting deeper into the week, we're receiving a lot of the photos from folks from up north through the ice storm, and we have a tremendously gorgeous, but also at the same time, whoa, photo for you. This one was sent in from Debbie Coffee Tuman, a gorgeous owl on an icy landscape here. This was taken out of her patio back doors in the Lakes of the North near Elmira. So Debbie, thank you so much for sending in this picture, and thank you to Great Rooms for sponsoring this as always. So viewer photo of the day brought to you by Great Rooms, sent in from Debbie Coffee Tuman. So thank you, Debbie, for sending that in. Just a gorgeous owl. But when you see the landscape, it's like, whoa. And that's what much of northern Michigan has looked like for several days. But coming up next, diving into our show, I'm going to take you into dew and frost formation. How exactly it happens and what needs to be in place for it to happen. Because there's some mornings you wake up and be like, well, there's no dew. Then there's other mornings you wake up and be like, whoa, everything's soaking wet. We explain why. We'll have that right after the break. And welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Forecast. Now, we're going to explain a few things that some may say, how does that happen? Dew and frost. Frost you might have a better idea of, but dew, you might always wonder, well, why do I go to bed and I wake up in the morning and I just have a bunch of water on my outdoor seating? Here's the reason why. Now, we'll also be going through this and explaining something called radiational cooling. Radiational cooling happens quite a bit, but it's when you have those clear skies, light winds, and that colder air sinks down to the surface. But it allows for temperatures to get down to where water should form, dew. So let's take a look at the daytime, right? We have a nice sunny day, we have temperatures warming, and the sun heats the earth to 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Nice surface temperature, but when we get to the overnight hours, that air starts to escape, especially if we don't have any wind, especially if we don't have any clouds. You have clear skies, light winds, that cooler air escapes? Radiational cooling. That cooling is faster under those clear skies, like I mentioned. Now here in Michigan, especially if you're closer to the big lakes or any lake, you get more of a sea breeze. You have more of a mixture, so you don't get nearly as cold. But if you're in the middle of inland, away from the big lakes, if you're inland and away from smaller inland lakes, you have lighter winds and that cooler air sinks to the surface. And cools your surface temperature off to about 43 degrees, let's say, because that heat is escaping. Now if you had clouds, that acts like a blanket, an insulator. So the heat doesn't completely escape. If you have wind, it mixes up the warmer air and cooler air, keeping temperatures a little bit warmer. But if you have those clear skies and light winds, that cooler air can escape. So let's talk about how we get dew. That first kind of explanation is radiational cooling. Basically how that warmer air that we see through the day cools off and escapes. Now let's add another factor to it. So the sun, again, warms us up. We're about 67 degrees. Pretty decent day. Right at the surface, you can see right above the grass blades, air is about 67 degrees. Now, you might hear us forecast dew points. If dew points are in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 60s and 70s is usually really muggy conditions. That's where the temperature has to get to start turning into moisture. So let's say your dew point is 43 degrees. That is the temperature when moisture forms. So we go from daytime to nighttime. Those warmer temperatures start to escape. The air right around the grass gets down to about 44 degrees. That's right around the dew point. So what's going to happen? Well, we start seeing that moisture form on those grass blades. That is dew. So the cooling forces that moisture onto the ground. Liquid water, or dew, forms in the above freezing temperatures. Now, you want frost, let's just cool the temperatures off about 8 degrees. So during the day, same setup, we warm up to about 63 degrees just above the grass blades, but notice your dew point. Your dew point is 32 degrees. So at night, again, warm air escapes, temperatures fall to about 32 degrees, and you start getting that moisture forming on the grass blades, but it's cold, so it's going to freeze. That is where you start getting the frost. So that cooling, again, forces moisture onto the ground, freezing temperatures, create those ice crystals, and frost forms. So there you go, that's the dew, that's frost, and radiational cooling. Let's add another player into the game, if you will. Pavement, very different. Pavement absorbs the heat, whereas the ground absorbs it a little bit, but not nearly as much as pavement. Pavement absorbs much more heat. So if your temperature outside is like 60, close to 70 degrees, the pavement temperature is going to be a little bit warmer. It's going to be about 75 degrees. And you can see here, non-paved, right around 67 degrees. So the grassy surfaces absorb less than the pavement. Go into the overnight, what's that mean? Well, it means they both lose heat, radiational cooling again in effect, but notice the non-paved temperature, right around 35 degrees. Pavement temperature is at 42 degrees. So pavement keeps us a bit warmer. So in cities where you have much more pavement out there, yeah, they're probably going to be just a little bit warmer than the country where you don't have a whole lot of pavement and you can cool off more. This is a prime example of what happens when it starts to snow in the fall, right? The roads, still warmer, don't really accept snow on the roads. It melts on contact, while areas like grassy spots can be cooler, can accept the accumulation of snow. So that is why, one, roadways, a bit warmer, but two, non-paved areas, especially countrysides, are a little bit cooler because they don't have that pavement. So when we take a look at the frost conditions or dewy conditions, yeah, non-paved temperature, right below freezing, you get frost. Roadways, 37 degrees, no frost. So that's indicative with everything across the board. So when you go to October, November, we see our first few snows of the season. where you can have air getting underneath that snow on grassy areas, it's going to allow for it to accumulate. On roadways, it's warmer. So you have the air temperature, which might support snow, but the pavement is warmer. It's going to melt it on contact. And it takes a little bit before the air temperature impacts the roadway. It probably takes a few good snows. Pretty cool. So when you take a look at air temperature, usually just above the surface, probably if you stand up right now. If you're at home, you stand up, yeah, probably 5-6 feet up. Air temperature's probably about 5-6-7 degrees warmer than it is closer to the surface of the grass. So air above surface takes much longer to cool down. Go back to that first few slides that we showed you about radiational cooling. When you have clear skies and that warmer air is escaping, that warmer air is up here. So it takes longer to cool that than it does the surface, because you have that warm air escaping, that warm air is going up into the air, and it's not going to cool as quickly. But where you have the spot where that warm air is leaving and air temperature filling in behind it, yeah, your surface temperature is going to be much colder. Hence why you have the frosty conditions at the surface, but non-freezing temperatures up in the air. So there you go. A little fun fact of how radiational cooling helps form dew, frost, and what cement does in those occasions as well, or pavement. And then also why it takes so much longer for air just above the ground to cool off more than air at the surface. So there you go. A lot of things to kind of take in there. But one thing to remember is when we give you those dew points, that is where you see that moisture form at the surface. So yes, 60, 70 degree dew points, it's very muggy. But if your overnight lows get to 60, 70 degrees, probably going to see a lot of that moisture at the surface. I'm Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens for Beyond the Forecast.
Now coming up next on Beyond the Forecast, we send it over to meteorologist John Gross, who talks about potholes, as it is that time of year that we start seeing those potholes grow. We'll have more on that right after the break.
Hey there everybody, meteorologist John Gross, and today we are going to be talking about potholes and exactly how do they develop. Now certain parts of the country are a little bit more susceptible for pothole development, and one big area that we know all too well, especially here living in the state of Michigan, is that we can see temperatures fluctuating quite a bit, and it's that change in temperatures from the thawing to the refreezing that really helps to promote and develop these potholes. So let's just go ahead and talk about exactly why they develop, and let's go ahead and talk about our road surface here. So as cars travel over the road, just wear and tear from anything, whether that be concrete, asphalt, eventually we start to see cracks forming there in the roadway. And once we start to get those cracks developing, we have precipitation. That happens time and time again. Now, whether that be rain, freezing rain, sleet, or even snow, eventually, once we get a temperature that's above 32 degrees, it becomes a liquid, and then that water will seep into those cracks. So now we have water pooling under the road surface. Now, again, what I mentioned earlier, especially here in the Great Lakes region where you see a lot of that freezing and thawing, that's what we'll start to see. So once we start to get temperatures back below freezing, remember that's below 32 degrees, that's when that water starts to freeze. And once it starts to freeze, it starts to expand. So now we're starting to widen that area of where that water originally was currently sitting. The roadway is forced upward because of that freezing and expansion, and then that starts to just eventually weaken the road surface itself. So once we start to get that, eventually temperatures, they go back above freezing, so now we're talking about that thawing cycle, and then the ice melts, so now you're talking about a void or a gap underneath the road surface. Well, we know that we have traffic and cars and people travel every single day, so now we just talk about normal wear and tear, cars traveling over that weak part of the roadway, and the end result in what we do see is what we call a pothole. And that's a big reason why that we usually are talking about pothole season, so to speak. during when we have bigger fluctuations in temperatures, otherwise known during the spring months or even the fall months. But technically, usually, we talk about a lot of potholes usually developing during the spring months, which can be March, April, or even going into May. And that's when you can really start to get not only just those little small potholes, but even sometimes greater, bigger potholes that can even do damage to your car, your tires, your alignment. Unfortunately, that can be very, very costly, but just know that weather can play a big part in why you might see a big pothole on one of the more common roads that you travel on a daily basis. I'm meteorologist John Gross reporting for Beyond the Forecast.
Thanks, John. Now, coming up next, me and meteorologist Haley Fischetti sit down for a new podcast for you, where we talk about this past system and the marks that it left and what's next. We'll have those details right after the break.
And welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Forecast. Now, in this last segment, me and meteorologist Haley Fischetti sat down and had one of our live streaming podcasts where you got to join us, discuss, and weigh in and ask questions about a certain topic. Now, with the storm that hit this past weekend, we decided the topic's going to be this system. We have to talk about this system, the historic ice storm that we saw with this, but also the severe weather we saw with this. We had 4 inches of rain near Cadillac. We had a confirmed tornado in southern Newaygo County on Sunday evening that went from Grant up towards Croton. So we were going to discuss this system, as well as kind of everything that we do with systems like this, policy-wise, as well as breaking in for tornado warnings. So we weighed in and let you know on the systems that are incoming or that went through and are incoming, and this is part of that. Check it out.
1 to 2 inches of snow is not a big deal, but when you have this much ice, even this much ice, coating things such as trees and power lines.
It's scary.
It is heavy weight. And so that will clearly bring a lot of stuff down. And we saw what it's capable of bringing down. It brought down a radio tower. It brought down
crazy
acres of trees. It brought down
It looks like
brand new
another
utility pole snapped.
world up in
It
the
does.
Upper Peninsula and the tip of the Met. Saw it on TikTok. I never see I'm on TikTok a lot, but I never see Northern Michigan on TikTok.
Right.
And they get TikToks of people being like,
whoa,
here's what it looks like. I was like, oh.
And us not being there, I can't say that I physically know what's going on.
No.
The only thing I can relate this to is ice storm from Cadillac in 1922. And the only reason I say that is because they had pictures here that show the incredible damage. The thing is, it looks worse up in Gaylord and Sheboygan and Petoskey and those areas than it does from those pictures.
I agree.
Now, granted, those pictures are from a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the infrastructure
similar.
part of it, but
that cripples roadways and power infrastructures and cities. Like, gas is unreal. I never thought in this day and age you would have issues getting gas. But if you don't have electricity, the pump won't work.
Yeah, having hospitals literally be like, we know you normally shouldn't come unless it's emergency, but we're actually serious this time.
Right, we can't do anything.
We can help you the best we can, but that's really it. It's scary up there.
This was kind of a double whammy, if you will, of a system. So we had the initial low pressure system coming in Friday, and that gave us some of those rain showers and thunderstorms.
A little
for the
rumble
lower
of thunder
peninsula.
here or there.
Saturday morning,
Yeah.
And then it switched over to more of that mix freezing rain for areas to the north. And that worked its way through Saturday, but it was dragging along a boundary front with another low
Yes.
that just worked through for Sunday. And that one had a little more gusto. There was another front. There was another wave of moisture.
So there you go. You can find that on the 910 News YouTube channel, as well as the Beyond the Forecast section of our webpage, or wherever you listen or watch your podcast. We'll have them up there as well. But we have these every Tuesday, and we give you usually a topic to talk about. But this week we just felt it was relevant to talk about this massive system that has created havoc across much of northern Michigan with that very thick ice. So again, check that out, and we'll have another one next week pertaining to fire danger, because that is next week. It is fire danger here on Beyond the Forecast. So thank you for tuning in today. We do appreciate it. For myself, as well as meteorologist John Gross, meteorologist Haley Fischetti. I'm Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. We do appreciate it. Be good, stay safe, take care. We'll see you guys tomorrow right here on Beyond the Forecast.